right, so today I'm going to talk about something really controversial. It's not why I'm bringing it up. I'm bringing it up to inform, um, and that's all it's about. But there's definitely going to be some negative feedback and stuff on this one, and I'm okay with that. Today I want to talk about test beds, air testing, and test boards, and what are they good for. So let's take a look at nail test boards. In my opinion, absolutely 100% worthless. Okay, I have no use for it, and I'll get into that here. Give me a moment. Before you judge, before you hit the thumbs down button and all that, watch the video. I'm trying to keep it quick so it's not super boring. Just listen through. So, air testing, what's it good for? It is good to hear the tone and see roughly where the VDI is going to land. As far as I'm concerned, that's all that's good for. Test beds, same thing. The only added thing I will say, I've got dimes buried, and I just recently buried another one. 6, 8, 10, and 12 inches. And I don't air test. I'll go over my little test bed and I'll see where the VDI is, what kind of tone I get. If I can't hit the 10 or 12 inch, sometimes the 8-inch dime, I'll adjust whatever detector I'm using and see if I can get it while running the detector stable. So first I'll adjust it out, play with the settings, see if I can get it. If I can get it, then I'll run it around and see if with those settings the detector's running stable, because it doesn't matter if you can hit a dime at 12 inches if the detector's running so unstable you can't use it under usual conditions, and it's no good. So with that said, I'm gonna try to keep it simple so this video doesn't take forever. And I want to talk about detector 1 and 2. I'm not going to give names. The reason being, I don't want to tell you the names of these detectors, and then I'm accused of pushing a certain manufacturer, a certain detector, anything like that. So we're going to go with metal detector 1 and 2. Number 2 was actually purchased first. The reason I'm calling it number 2, it was by far not number 1 in performance. Detector 1 was purchased probably after I had 50 or more plus hours on it. So detector 2, I'll say as well, this is about 10 years ago. They're both $1,000 plus detectors. I'll give you that. So detector 1, one of the first things I did at the time, all I had in the ground was 1/4 at like 6 inches. I don't get into test beds, and I'll get into that much more in depth of why I don't get into test beds. But I had 1/4 at 6 inches. I like to see what kind of numbers I get, that kind of thing, hear the tone. And I can't find it. I can't find it with detector number 1. So I pull out old trusty detector number 2, and I hit it. And I thought, oh man, that's, I just spent $1,500 on this detector, and it's not finding this 1/4 at 6 inches, right? I mean, you can imagine how I felt. So anyhow, I overlooked that. I think some people would box it up right then and send it back. Within a 2-week period of time, keep in mind, this is more like 12, 13 years ago. Within the first 2 weeks, I'd found probably, 6 or 7 silver coins. All of them 6 inches or deeper. So it was already kind of out the window worrying about this detector and its depth capabilities. Within that 2 weeks, I hit a signal up against a tree that was just, I thought it was going to be a pop can, part of a can, something big. I mean, this thing is screaming at me. So I dig it up. I'm in roots and stuff, so I'm digging slow. It showed me it was 10 inches roughly, and at 9 to 11 inches, and this isn't an exaggeration. It was deep. Was a barber dime. And I thought, what is that? Well, this led me into doing a little bit more research, which I'll get into later. But here's why we get into why I get into why test beds are no good. And the reason I'm doing this is they're everywhere on YouTube. People judging detectors from their test bed, air testing these test boards. Most detectors, I don't know if they do it anymore, used to say, pretty much there was something in the manual about don't put much faith in air testing. It's just to hear the VDI and all that. I don't know if they still do that on many detectors, but that was real common back then. Matter of fact, detector one that I just spoke of absolutely said that. So let's get into why I had no problem hitting that dime at 10 inches and why I couldn't get that quarter at 6 inches. Okay, before I go into that, there is something I want to say. So after I had hundreds of hours on detector 1 and 2, I came across my very first video of a test board. And the test board, what it is, they mark it out and they lay nails usually at different angles close to a target in the center, and they swing over it at different directions, and they judge detectors, determine which ones are better, comparing detectors off of this test board. So after hundreds of hours on detector 1 and detector 2, what I come to find was detector 1 was far superior in heavy iron, finding the good mass targets. Matter of fact, to this day, I still have not found a better detector at that in general than that detector. And it is still one of the best coin detectors I've ever used. And we're talking 12, 13-year-old technology here. But my point is, I watched this video, and the guy's using detector 1 and detector 2 on his test board, and detector 1 failed it miserably. And the gist of it was detector 1 is junk. You want detector 2 if you're looking to buy a detector. I can tell you from hundreds of hours on each one of those detectors, it was absolutely opposite of what you find in the real and when you're real world metal detecting. And that's the problem. You can't get that. I just watched a video this morning doing a little research for this video. A guy is in his garage on a concrete pad with a wood board, and he's making this detector look amazing. I've used that detector. I have no use for that particular detector for anything. I mean, I am a big fan of a lot of different detectors, a lot of different manufacturers for different reasons. And this particular detector, I can't stand. I have no use for it in any of my metal detecting, but yet it performed incredibly on this test board. I can tell you from real world experience, not a fan, not one bit. So let's talk about the halo effect, because this plays a huge part in test beds. There is some debate that the halo effect doesn't exist, and I'm gonna make it real clear. I think you'll understand, especially if you've been detecting a while, why the halo effect does actually work. Why there is a halo effect. So the theory is that, I'm gonna kind of put these in layman terms. That the metals leach out and make the target look bigger. Okay, and some people say that's not what's going on. Well, before I give you my reasoning behind it, I'm going to start off with, I recently in the last year had a talk with Keith Wills out of East Texas Metal Detectors, brokenmetaldetectors.com. He's the only guy that I'm aware of in the United States, besides the manufacturers, who repairs metal detectors. He's been doing it since '82 or '83. He's been metal detecting since the early '70s, and he absolutely will tell you all day long targets have a halo effect. How do you get that halo effect? You know, I don't think that there should be a debate over a halo effect. Rather, how long does it take to create that halo effect? Well, I can tell you after 8 years, detector one still couldn't pick up that quarter at 6 inches. Other detectors could. So I don't know. And it probably depends on ground conditions, ground mineralization, and all of that. But in my opinion, I think it takes decades. And I'll get into why exactly I believe that. Number one, the halo effect. Even if you're new to the hobby, you've been detecting a few months, you've gotten a high signal, stuck your shovel in the ground, started to pull out, and you see little bits of iron. I mean, just the soil is stained. And all of a sudden, if you're running discrimination, now you're getting it's gone. Or if you're running like in some sort of all metal mode, now it's a low tone. That's because you broke up that halo effect. You broke up the halo around the target. And why I say it's a halo effect, you know, somebody could say, well, you broke up that piece of iron. I have found where I find the nail and all around it was the soil is stained, and you know the nail's still in there. I went down the side of it or whatever, and it just broke that halo effect. That's all I did. So that's one reason I strongly believe in the halo effect. Number two, this happened many years ago. I was at a school that eventually I found over 200 wheat pennies, a bunch of silver coins, a large cents, some large cents, great local tokens. It was a schoolyard. School was built somewhere around the turn of the century, but there had been schools on the property since like 1852. So I found all of these. What I was finding, every good target I pulled out of there was 6 inches or deeper. But of course, you don't just detect 6 inches or deeper. And I would find a copper penny at 4 or 5 inches, a modern one, but copper, and the detector would kind of struggle to hit it. But then I'd find a wheat penny as deep as 10, 11 inches that came across really good. Now, why is that? You know, well, you pull out a copper penny and there's not corrosion or light corrosion, and then you get the ones that are deeper, 6 inches or more, that are wheat pennies. Wheat pennies and pennies up until '82 or '83 when they went to zinc clad are the same composition. Okay, so a wheat penny and a copper penny up to like '82 or '83, I forget which year, are the same composition. Yet the deeper ones sounded better than the shallower ones. And that made me realize, hey, the halo effect, that's why. So you got that. So how does that affect these test beds? Well, unless it's decades old, how do you know how a particular detector is going to act in that test bed? You know, you've got detector one that on a test bed that's 10 years or less, I think would fail miserably. Yet you get it out in the real world, and it's going to shine. And although it's 12, 13 years old, it's still relevant. Still will get the job done, as good and better than most detectors. So you've got that. Then you've got detector two that would shine in a test garden that's 10 years or less. But when you get iron in the real world that is leached out more, you know, you're going to get a different outcome. And that's why I have no problem with people using test beds to do some testing, tweak their detectors and stuff like that. I don't mind videos on it. But when you're making or breaking a detector, when you are reviewing it from your test bed, I don't watch them. I wouldn't watch them. I wouldn't recommend them to anybody because it's not real world. When's the last time you walked out into a field and knew that there was a dime 8 inches with a nail off to the side an inch? It doesn't happen. How does the detector work going up to it, up to that target? So my point is, these test beds, they're just not giving you accurate information. Again, when's the last time you walked out into a field, a new place, and you knew right where the target was? It doesn't happen. What's leading up to it? I'll tell you something I found with some of the best detectors that I love. They don't latch on to targets good. You really have to learn them to hear it latch on to a good target amongst iron and amongst trash. And that's way different than walking up to a painted spot on the ground where you know a dime is 6, 8, 10 inches, whatever, and being out in the real world and listening to all the signals around it and how, I mean, there's so much more that goes into how a detector functions and works than knowing where a target is and going and running over it. Detector, let's go back to detector 1 for a moment. I started doing some more playing. I was at quarter at 6 inches, a fluke. So I started doing I did some shallower targets, put a nail above it, a nail beside it, and I was getting horrible results. It didn't affect me one bit, and I'll tell you why. That detector, I found more coins and relics with iron surrounding the good target, on top of the good target, encased in one instance. I had a beautiful quarter signal all day long. Knew I was going to dig a quarter, so I'm scratching my head when I pull out a chunk of iron. And I never did that. I mean, this is one of the best detectors I've ever used at differentiating between iron and coins. Well, I noticed what looked like silver on the edge, and I kind of smacked it on the ground, and some of the iron come off. I ended up having to use electrolysis, and that was a barber quarter under there, encased in iron. Never seen anything like it. But yet, when I did, even after that, I had stuff in the ground for a few years, I still got horrible results with detector 1. Detector 2 shined, but out in the real world, detector 1 blew detector 2 away time and time again. Now, don't get me wrong, I kept it around because there were some other things that I loved about that detector. I mean, I'm a big person believing, there's different tools for different jobs. But yet, the outcomes that I started to see were absolutely wrong. And like I said, I don't want to make a super long video. I have several other instances I could throw out there, but to keep from making this just unbearably boring, I want to leave it at that. So why am I bringing this up? Again, so many people buy detectors based on people that are doing reviews using test beds and air testing and test boards. And anybody can do what they want. What I am telling you is I wouldn't. Absolutely not. If you're new to the hobby, and whether you're new or you've been in the hobby for a long time and you're in the market for a new detector, start with the locals. What are the locals using and having success with? What's working, what's not working? Watch some videos, talk to people. I'm not an expert on every detector, believe me. But if I've used it, I'll tell you my experience with it. I'll be honest about it. I have no problem with that. If I don't know, I'll find somebody who's used it and their experience with it. I've helped people a lot when I was a dealer and stuff, and not being able to use every single detector. I rely on friends and stuff. But what I'm saying, you can do what you want, but take it with a grain of salt. Test boards, when I see somebody that uses a test board, I've lost all respect for them. I have no interest in any of their videos, any of what they have to say or anything. if somebody is using a test garden to compare detectors or to review a detector, that holds absolutely nothing with me. Nothing. I think it's hokey. I think it's very misleading, and I personally would never buy a detector based on somebody's review or somebody's experience in a test bed. I believe in most cases it takes decades to get the halo effect. And when you're talking halo effects, how did one detector, one could shine, but after the halo effect really kicks in after decades might be horrible. And vice versa. Take for example detector 1. It would, I don't know of a test bed that it would work good in, but yet to this day, 13 years old, 12 years old, however old it is, I would still put it up there with the best detectors, and finding coins, especially in heavy iron, with a lot of trash. Incredible, but would perform horribly in test gardens, test boards, and all that. And I watched the videos of them showing that. And it just, I feel so bad for all the misinformation out there. That's why I started this, why I'm starting to do this. I don't care how many people follow, I don't care how many people thumbs down, whatever. But if I can get through to a couple people and help them make better decisions, it's worth it all. So go ahead and hit the thumbs down. I know a bunch of you are. If not, I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the thumbs up. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll bring something to you next week.